And joining us now for analysis of the governor's address, we welcome Chuck Coughlin, president and CEO of the political consulting firm High Ground, and Carl Gentles, a partner in the Gentles Agency. Gentlemen, good to have you both here. Thank you so much for joining us. Carl, I want to start with you here on the left side of the aisle, Democratic governor here. Your thoughts, overall impressions of what you heard?
Well, I thought she laid out some really great proposals. She talked about this Arizona promise around opportunity and security and freedom, and I think she hit on a number of things that you would expect Republicans to hit on. I think she tried to go around the corner on them up front and try to bookend them before the whole session starts. But I thought she had a good speech. It was a little chilly in that room. It was more chilly in that room than it was outside outside. But I think there's a lot that's going to have to happen this session. She's going to need an awful lot of compromise. She's going to need an awful lot of her political skills at work here, because obviously it's a divided government. She's going to have a really challenging time with Republicans, I think, this year, trying to pass any of her agenda. What
do you think? What'd you see and what'd you hear?
I heard a lot of the same things Carl's talking about. I mean, she hit all the talking points. I mean, if you poll on, jobs, job training, economic security, tax credits for childcare, you hit all. Those are all really popular programs across the board. You wouldn't know it by the reception, the water security programs that she talked about, the Colorado River, which ought to be a uniform ovation down there, and didn't get anything from them. It's a very hostile environment for her. She has had a hard time developing relationships with this president and the speaker and any Republican leadership down there. She's even struggled with some of her own minority party relationships. And so how she executes on that, that's the magic of what happens during a legislative session.
To Chuck's point, I mean, a lot of the things she talked about should be really bipartisan, right? Let's get support for child care. Let's try and get homeless veterans off the street.
Yeah.
And there were just some of these things, and they're great proposals. And we'll see what happens as the legislative session goes along. But I mean, something was just not quite there in the audience. I was listening in the applause that we heard, right? Because the response was really kind of muted.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't remember a State of the State address with such tepid response.
Yeah, exactly. And then, we didn't see it, but Warren Peterson led off before the Senate president led off before her speech, and even qualified. The biggest challenge everybody's looking for in this session is the 1-2-3 extension. Mm-hmm. That's the extension of the state land trust deal.
But before you go further with that, the idea of the Senate president basically doing his own speech before the state address, is that just because they're different parts? I don't remember that happening.
It hasn't. I think he did it last year, and
yeah.
I saw him do it this year too. It's a first, and you guys aren't covering it, but that's the whole body that he's talking to in there, and he laid out a very controversial proposal to enshrine ESAs in the Constitution, along with the extension of 1-2-3. Those two things don't go together.
Yeah,
and that's going to jeopardize that extension.
What happened if they actually got that across and got that on a ballot? I mean, first of all, do you think that they can get that on the ballot?
I don't think they can. ESA is a non-starter for the governor, so I think if it's tied to Prop 123, Prop 123 is just not going to go anywhere with her. So they've got to come up with some compromise and to kind of decouple those things.
But the idea that this is a referral and that they can go around the governor, that's not, they can go around to a certain extent.
They can go around to a certain extent if they just put it on the 26th ballot. This expires in this fiscal year, in this July of this year. It's over. And so the blame for the non-renewal of that extension will fall on the Republicans.
Squarely on their shoulders.
Yeah.
So they've got to come up with something different.
It's a big game of chicken going on.
That is an absolute non-starter.
And we know what the public seems to not be all that crazy about ESAs last time it was on the ballot, if I remember correctly.
Well, right. And now, the Secretary of Education or Tom Horne has said that he's not going to look at anything under $19,000 or $2,000. So basically, he's saying, please fleece me up to $19.99, and you'll be just fine.
Yeah, it's like, just don't take too much, but then we'll get to you later.
Yeah, your point is well taken. That when this was referred as we all recall, Governor Ducey got it passed by the legislature, and the education advocates referred it to the ballot, and they prevailed at the ballot, defeating it. And then he brought it back 3 sessions ago at the end of the session, and they institutionalized the ESAs in exchange for several other things, for $100 million in poverty-weighted funding for schools and a bunch of other stuff. He got that done. But now, the hue and cry from the Democrats is we need oversight on that. It's taxpayer dollars, and she referred to that several times. Taxpayer dollars should be accounted for.
And who would be against oversight of taxpayer dollars? That's the real question that really I think Peterson and Republicans need to answer. I mean, if they are confident in the way the ESA program is working, shouldn't be a problem with any oversight.
As far as water is concerned, she said Wilcox Basin, that was obviously a big point of contention. But with that and other areas of active water management, groundwater management, if the legislature fails, I will again do something. I mean, that's some of the most pointed things she said was about water.
Well, I think she has to. I think, and by the way, the whole speech and this entire session was really, you have to put it on the backdrop of a 2026 election coming up, right? So she's really doing what she can to kind of lay out first her policy agenda for this session, but also really looking forward to what this election is going to look like. And water is going to be a big issue. Border security is going to be a big issue, and of course, Prop 123 will be a big issue.
Yeah. So what she's referring to there is the Gila Bend Basin, the Gila Bend area by Buckeye, which has these significant problems similar to what Cochise County has. That's going to be the next AMA unless they act. And the AMA does a lot of things, but it affects the entire region rather than prescribing specific conservation policies that can affect an aquifer. Tim Dunn and some Republicans have been working on ideas to do that. I was hopeful that she would have called them out. I'm looking forward to working with Senator Dunn or others on things, or housing stuff with Selena Bliss. You didn't hear that today, but she's going to need that Republican participation in order to get some of those things done.
For that 2026 gubernatorial race, the issue of water, what side does it fall on?
It should fall on either side. I mean, it's a
But as a campaign
issue.
issue, who's got the upper hand here?
The conservation stuff is overwhelmingly popular.
Yeah.
In a statewide ballot, sorry to mention this, but 63% of the population lives here in Maricopa County. I'm not going to be defending the ranchers and the farmers out there. Yeah. So on those types of issues, it's overwhelmingly popular on statewide studies to do something to help preserve aquifers in greater Arizona.
Okay, so in the grand scheme of things, it sounded to me like the speech was relatively, even keel. Then toward the end, when you got to water, when you got to ESAs and these sorts of things, when you got to any idea that fertility and the right to contraception, is the legislature going anywhere with that?
Well, look, she's very clear that she's going to protect, reproductive freedoms as much as she possibly can. And I think she has a pretty big stick to carry right now on that issue, given what she did with the abortion repeal 1863 law. So we'll see a little bit more of her ability, her attempt to try and protect women's freedoms in IVF, contraceptive access, and those sorts of things. And by the way, those are individual freedoms that the Republicans are typically known for trying to protect. And I think, again, she's kind of done a little end around on them to try and make sure that she's got her position staked out as she goes into this election.
Well, we were talking about earlier how cold it was in that room, reception-wise. It'll be a colder day that anything like that gets done down there. The Republicans are not in favor of liberalizing any type of contraceptive legislation. Remember what the struggle was with getting the 1864 ban.
Yeah.
We needed a couple Republicans to do that. She got them. And even that wasn't applauded today down there. That's a hot button issue down there. Not going to happen.
All right, we got to stop you right there. Gentlemen, good conversation. Good to have you both here. Thanks so much for joining us. That's it for now.